Welcome to another episode of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I am your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you another video, and today we're going to be continuing What If Spider-Man Was in ReZero, The Princess and the Spider, Season 2, Part 2. As we go into Part 2 now, we are just one more video away from concluding this series. I'd like to take the time to say thank you to everyone who has supported the reboot of this franchise. This story originally came out over the summer and had to scrap it away, decided to redo it, do the retelling, and I am pleased with the response that it has been given. So I want to say thank you to everyone who has supported me, supported the channel, as we are on the road to 2K and beyond. Again, as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcasting status to come out now and in the future. Also, stay tuned and check out everything else that we have on the channel also. Check out our other stories, our series, and also be on the lookout for more Power Core discussions that we're going to be having coming out in the near future. Also, stay tuned for the end of the week as we'll be getting into our remaining stories, that being What If Deku Was a Power Ranger Part 10. That will conclude Season 4 of My Hero Academia before we get into the second movie, Heroes Rising, of What If Deku Was a Power Ranger. And on Friday, we'll be getting back into the series of What If Naruto Was the Avatar Part 2. So stay on the lookout for all the other videos. Watch that community tab like a hawk and always be on alert because you never know when a video is going to drop. But anyway, without further ado, let's get into today's story. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Pierre would awaken back to the sanctuary, arriving just at the point after he had completed the first trial. Now seeing that this was his new checkpoint, he saw now that he had a place to start. However, before he could do anything, his main focus would be on carrying Amelia and getting her out of there, as she was unable to complete the trial. After making their way back and making sure that Amelia was okay, he would be called into the woods privately by Garfield. Peter trying to get more information out of him, trying to figure out how it was that his sister was able to leave the barrier but not him. After dodging the question in the subject matter, they would eventually arrive to the clearing, where Peter would come face to face with Ryuzu, although this time she would be in a white cloak. As the three would begin to discuss the machinations of the sanctuary and just exactly what they were going to do, Peter would ask more about Frederica, asking if there were any ways that they could possibly escape, like she had. However, Ryuzu would explain that Frederica didn't simply escape. It was that she just simply didn't meet the requirements to be kept in the barrier in the first place. The barrier kept anyone who was half-blood of any type of being, but purebloods, or those with mixed and sorted blood, would be able to leave at free will, thus explaining that both she and Garfield had two different fathers, and that while her mother was human, her father was a mixed blood, thus giving her 1 1/2. Allowing her to be able to pass through the barrier. However, in the meantime, this would still give no information to Pierre in terms of who exactly could take on the trials. Instead, Pierre would offer for him to take it instead, believing that if he could do it quick enough, he could get everyone out. However, his other main focus would be on getting out of the sanctuary so that he could get back to the mansion as soon as possible. Based off of everything he had learned, it seemed as it was not too far from now that it was going to be placed under attack by Elsa once again, and that in doing so, they were going to have to figure a way to save everyone in the mansion as soon as possible. However, once he had made the offer to go through the trials, Garfield would not take this too kindly. Ryuzu would assure Peter that she would keep the secret, as she would tell him to stay calm. However, as he did so, his spider sense would go off as Garfield would attack him instantly. Ryuzu, and now even more of them, would appear as well, Garfield leading the charge as he wasn't going to let Peter leave no matter what. You think I'm just gonna let you get away, huh? I don't trust you. I've never liked you from the start, and every time I get closer to you, that smell just starts to grow. The smell? What? The witch's scent? Yeah, it's exactly what I call it. The witch's scent. I don't know what exactly tricks or schemes you've got planned here, but as far as I'm concerned, you ain't going anywhere near that damn barrier. As far as I'm concerned, you're no different than the witch cultist. Garfield would lunge at Peter. Peter, using his spider senses, he would be able to dodge his attacks. Garfield was starting to increase in strength and his ferocity, but Peter was holding his own as well. In the ensuing fight, Peter would throw off a few of the smoke bombs that he had created, allowing himself to escape into the night, although he knew he wouldn't have too many places to hide, knowing that Garfield and his sense of smell would lead him right to him. However, before he could get too far, he would see Rom hiding behind a tree, the pink-haired maid calling him over. She would cast a spell that would temporarily allow for Peter's scent to be hidden, giving him enough time as he had a special meeting place that he had to get to. She would state that Roswaal wanted to meet with Peter, and she would tell him that she would buy time, as long as she could. With the time that he had been brought, Peter would make his way to where Roswaal was staying. Roswaal, eager to see the young man as he arrived. You want to see me, Roswaal? Ooh, yes. If it isn't our favorite Spider-Man. So, it seems you found yourself in a bit of a jam, have we not? Yeah, it's Garfield. I don't know why, but he won't let me go through with the trials. He's trying to keep us all here, and I don't know why. Yes, Garfield can be a bit troubled, but I can see that your mind is clouded in more ways than one. It's just, before I left, I saw something. Beatrice, she... Something involving Miss Beatrice now. She had a book. Roswaal, I don't know what's going on here, but I need you to be for real with me. Is she? Is she one of the witch cultists? My. Now what would ever give you that idea, Peter? She had a book. It looks similar to the one Pellicuse had when I fought him. I don't know why, but I feel like that book might be the key. Ah, you are referring to the tomes. The Book of Wisdom. It is a book that is said to be able to see into the future, down to the last detail. While I cannot speak any clearer on her motivations or why she has the tome, I can be for certain that she is not a member of the cultists. However, it is said that many of the tomes that exist now are mere copies or fakes, and that the original has been lost due to time. As to why and how she has them, well, that's something you'll have to find out for yourself. Can I believe you, Roswaal? You think you can't? I'd be lying if I said I could, but you're the only one that seems to be sane right now. I don't have time to deal with Garfield. I have to get out of here. You're in such a hurry, Peter. Is there something waiting for you? Peter would be a bit taken aback at those words. He couldn't really understand this feeling. If he didn't know any better, he would assume as if Roswaal knew something. As if he understood what Peter was trying to do before he even did it. Peter wouldn't respond as he would prepare himself to leave. Sneaking out of the cabin, he would make his way towards the edge of the barrier. Otto helping him along the way with the ground dragon as the two would begin to ride. They would run into Rom not soon after, but they wouldn't get very far, as Garfield would appear blocking their path. "Oh no, Peter, we're in trouble." "So you thought you could give me the runaround, huh? And you even used that smoking hot babe to do it. Now, Garfield, you know that this would not be the most logical. Save it, Toots. I don't have time for you and your sweet talk. If you're gonna work with that bastard, then I'll rip all of your heads off." Peter would dismount from the ground dragon, pulling his sword from his sheath as he would don his mask. So, the claimed hero shows his true colors. "Garfield, I don't have time for this. I need to get out of here now." "Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you and all of your cultists got a lot of plans for the sanctuary, don't ya?" Garfield's body would slowly start to change, morphing as he grew into that of a beast. "You're not getting out of here. None of you are. Don't you understand? You're caught in the eyes of the sanctuary. You can never escape." Garfield would grow in size into that of a man-beast. Peter, now knowing that he was going to have to give it his all in this fight, he would start to channel the wind spirits all around him, as the two would engage in an epic brawl. Peter's sword would do little to Garfield, however, he would be able to land a few kicks and punches of his own. Some of the other villagers had shown up with their own spears, attempting to help Peter and buy it as distractions to allow him to escape, Otto pleading to them for help. Peter tried to tell them all to run and to get out of there. Knowing that Garfield was in a bloodlusted state, there was no telling what he would be capable of. "You guys have to get out of here! Run! You can't!" Before Peter could say any more, Garfield would start to maw through some of the villagers, slashing and tearing away at them. It would become like that of a bloodbath, shocking Peter to his very core and angering him. His blood starting to boil in rage, seeing just how distraught and how angered Garfield had become. "Garfield, you bastard! What's the problem, huh? You think I'll just let you leave? I don't care how many of you I have to. That's exactly the point. You don't care. You don't care about reason. You don't care about listening. I don't need a lecture from you." "You're right. You don't. And you know what? I'm done trying to convince you. Everyone get back." Peter's words would echo throughout the forest as everyone would step aside. Peter starting to spiral as the lights would begin to shine all around him as he walked forward to the man-beast that was Garfield. The two of them starting to walk casually before eventually breaking into a run. Rom and Otto would yell for Peter to not go through with it, but Peter was sick of it all. He was sick and tired of Garfield and his snobby, self-righteous attitude, and Garfield was ready to rip everyone to shreds. Peter was so caught up in his own power that he didn't see the stone that he had been given by Frederica starting to glow. As the two combatants would engage with one another, Garfield slashing away at Peter, Peter landing in his own combination of attacks, the two of them looking to tear each other limb from limb. Peter had had absolutely enough. He was sick of seeing the innocent die, of seeing the ones who could not defend themselves be trampled upon, all because of his own indecision. That ended now. As Peter and Garfield continued to beat down upon one another, the stone would begin to glow more and more until eventually the bright light would flash all through the forest. Peter would slowly come back to consciousness before awakening inside of a hollow sanctuary. As he arrived to the outside, he would see that Amelia would be nowhere to be found. No one for that matter. Everyone would be gone. Pierre wasn't sure of how he had gotten here or just where he had come from. He knew he was still in the sanctuary, but it seemed as though everything was covered in a blanket of snow. Pierre walked to one of the homes where many of the villagers had been resting, but nothing remained except their clothes scattered all across the ground. It just seemed as if everyone had disappeared, almost as freaky as the stories of Roanoke. As Pierre made his way walking through the snow, he would see a single rabbit hopping towards him. Of all the things, he wondered where a rabbit had come from. Not entirely sure, Pierre would reach out his hand towards the rabbit, looking to pet it at least. However, his spider sense would go off at the last second, Pierre instinctively moving his hand. Seeing that it had been cut deeply, he would see the rabbit, its lips soaked in his blood. Pierre's spider sense then started to go off like crazy as he looked around and saw that rabbits were surrounding him at every which end. It didn't take Pierre too long to realize that whatever they weren't ordinary rabbits. They were bloodlusted, and they all had their eyes set on him. As the horde began to glow, their eyes bright red, they would all begin to hop and move towards him. Pierre would use his propulsion spell, sending a gust of wind to push him into the air as he jumped from treetop to treetop, trying desperately to escape the horde of rabbits. He could tell that whatever they weren't normal, and they were most likely seeking him as a meal. Pierre would continue to run until eventually he got to a cliffside. He would use every bit of web fluid that he had inside of his web shooters, blasting away at all the rabbits to try to bind them and hold them in place. As he did so, a few of the horde would get past and he would use his sword to slash away at them, and using some of his wing cannons to shoot and blast them away. But for every rabbit he cut, it seemed as if two more would just suddenly appear. The horde starting to overwhelm him, a few getting a couple of bites and scratches upon him until eventually, in a last-ditch effort, he would blast them all away. The blast sending him off the cliffside as he would descend into the ground, falling from almost 100 feet with nowhere to truly land. Even with the cushioning of the snow, he would sprain his ankle as he hit the ground. However, now he could hear the massive hops, the horde hovering above. As he looked up to the cliffside, he could see all the rabbits looking down upon him. He knew very well what was about to happen. Desperately, Pierre would try to run through the pain, running as far as he could, but the rabbits would just cascade over the cliff's edge, descending and falling upon him. As they did so and they started to surround his body, Pierre would yell in abject horror as he could feel his body slowly being ripped to shreds. The rabbit horde surrounding him entirely as they began to bite and gnaw at him. He felt every excruciating pain in detail. He could feel them as they tore away at his legs and his ligaments. He could feel as he ripped away at the bone marrow of his arms. He could feel them burrowing within his stomach. He could feel them pulling out his innards. He could feel them as they began to devour his body. Every pain and sensation was being felt all at once. If he could have just died there, it would have been so much easier. But no, he could feel everything that was happening. Even as blood started to fill his eye sockets, even as they started to devour his voice box and he could no longer hear the sound of his own shrill scream. The last thing he would see would be the glowing eyes of a rabbit as it looked down upon his eye socket, biting and gnawing as they pulled out his eyes. But even then, he could still feel the pain, even if he couldn't see it. He felt everything until finally they made their way to his brains, devouring them and destroying and scrambling the signal, until eventually nothing of him remained, as the snow began to bellow all around, and the horde had finished feasting. All that remained were the tatters of blue and red.
The
Peter would awaken, but he would find himself not at the sanctuary. But instead he would find himself back in the dimension, or the castle of the witches. Home to the witches' tea party. He could feel his mind slowly repairing itself from the trauma that he had experienced. As he looked over to the hillside, he could see Echidna enjoying her pot of tea. As she waved over to him, Peter would rush over to her immediately. Before she even had a chance to say a word, he would wrap her into a hug, thanking her profusely for pulling him out of that nightmare. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's okay, Peter. You're really just... Thank you. Thank you. Just thank you. How did I come back from that? How did I... Peter, it's fine. You just need to calm... How? I was eaten. I felt it. It felt... Peter, you need to relax. I can't relax. I was eaten. They ate me. Don't you get it? They ate me. They freaking ate me, man. They ate me. Echidna will allow Peter a chance to calm down. A traumatic experience such as that was not one that any person could just easily get over. He would slowly take a seat before taking out and reaching his hand for the cup of tea that sat in front of him. At that point, he just needed to drink something, anything. In fact, he gulped down 3 more cups. It wasn't until he took down the 4th cup that he started to realize what he was drinking wasn't really all that much tea. While he wanted to spit it up, he was already midway through the 4th cup and he just decided to down it. Echidna even had a dazed look on her face. She knew that something had to have bothered him that much if he was willing to drink that much of the tea. I had cookies as well, if you wanted some. Before she could even finish, Peter reached out for the plate and started devouring them. He started drinking more of the tea and eating the cookies. Echidna wasn't sure if she should be happy and thrilled or if she should be shocked and worried. I mean, most people don't just eat the food of the witch without any thought, but the boy was just scarfing it down. Peter just needed something to distract himself, but even still he couldn't stop shaking. Thank you. Thank you. Just thank you. I understand. What happened to me? How did I was able to pull you here. I was able to sense it and I drew you to me. I just don't know. I just don't know. It's understandable, Peter. We've all suffered under her. The Witch of Envy. I don't want to know what goes through her mind. So I'm back, but how exactly how long have I... What are you trying to say? I mean, do you remember me? Of course. You've been here before. I remember that very well. So that means... It means you're not different. Well, I am the same as you've seen me before. From your trials to the first time you arrived to my tea party. But if that's true, then that means you. Yes, Peter. I am not affected. So, return by death. Peter covered his mouth after saying the words, expecting to be killed or for Echidna to die in that very instant, but nothing happened. That's right, Peter. You're safe here. Peter would breathe a heavy sigh of relief as he slumped back in his chair, taking a deep breath, breathing in and out of his mask like it was a paper bag since he knew he would hyperventilate. Echidna said nothing. She simply allowed Peter to catch himself. Well, what did I just experience? What exactly was that thing? What you experienced were one of the three great mob beasts, created by the Witch of Gluttony over 400 years ago, Daphne. One of the three great mob beasts. You've already encountered one before, the great whale. You've also now experienced the wrath of the great rabbit, and there's also the black serpent. All three of them exist in the world, but you have defeated the white whale. Even still, I just didn't think that'd be possible. Who would make something so devastating? I can't fully understand her myself, although defeating the rabbit is not as easy as you'd think it is. It's not? Oh no, not at all, Peter. To defeat the rabbit, you have to slay them all at once. I would go into more detail, but the one who knows the most about it would be Daphne herself. Would you like to speak to her? How can I? You're all supposed to be dead. Yes. However, my soul remains here in the Castle of Witches. In this dimensional plane, it's all mental, really. I can share my body as a host, if you will, to allow the Witch of Gluttony an audience with you. And you would do that? Of course. If that's what you truly wish for, I will gladly give it to you. Okay then, I'll talk to her. Really? You're just going to keep making deals with witches? I don't know if you're brave or delusional. Don't get me wrong. I don't completely trust you, Echidna. But you haven't done anything to me yet. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could. It doesn't take a genius to know that I don't really have much power in this situation. I'm pretty much at your mercy, and yet you're still helping me willingly. So it's obvious that whatever you need, it requires for me to still be alive. Otherwise, what use would you have to cater to my whims? As tactical and sharp as ever. Well spoken, too. It seems that Mr. Stark has taught you well. Yeah, he did. Very well then. I will bring her forth to you. But be warned. Do not look at her directly, Peter. She will be tied in restraints, and you are not to touch her. You must not do any of these things. Do not release her, or it will be the end of you. Peter would gulp at those words, as he will allow for his audience with the witch. However, as Echidna's body would begin to change, who would appear would be not who Peter was expecting. Instead, it would be a small girl with blue hair. As she wore flowers in her hair, she would walk up to Peter, extending her hand out in a playful manner. Hi, are you bad? Am I bad? I don't think so. Seeing that she wanted a handshake, Peter would reach out to do so. You really are good. What makes you say that? Because only good people don't feel pain. I'm sorry, what? Peter looked down at his arm and he could see that it had been pulled from its socket. There was no blood, no gore. It seemed as if his arm had just been ripped off like a porcelain doll. What the f... Peter would begin to hyperventilate once again, not sure what was happening. Daphne would explain that only bad people would feel pain, but that he was a good person deep down. Truly a hero. Peter would try to ask her what she had done to him. As he reached out towards her, more of his body would begin to crumble and break as if he were made out of glass, until eventually he would fall completely on the ground. Of course, he didn't feel any pain, but at the same time, it felt as if he were on one trippy dream. However, it wouldn't take too long for this dream to continue, as a bellowing yell would be heard from the sky, as a girl dressed in pink and blue would come crashing down with her fist, punching Peter's remains over and over again until he was completely restored, good as new. The blonde-haired girl yelling in anger at Peter to be more kind and loving, and that if he wasn't, she was going to heal him with her wrath. Peter wasn't sure just who exactly she was, although he did thank her for the help. She would give him a welcome, although she would still pout at him angrily, Peter finding her to be a bit cute, although why she was threatening him with kindness, he had no idea. Eventually she would disappear, however, and the only thing that would remain would be a coffin-like statue, suspended on nothing but mechanical spider-like legs. The maiden-like coffin would open up, revealing a small girl that had been chained inside, blindfolded as she looked over to Peter. So hungry. Huh? Who are you? I am Gluttony. You're Gluttony. I'm really hungry. Ooh, that smell. Gluttony would get closer to Peter as she started to sniff him. You smell delicious. Tasty. Tenderizing. Hey now, I don't want to be eaten again. If you're hungry, we'll get you some Big Macs. Big Macs? What's a Big Mac? Oh man, I forgot. You've never had a Big Mac? A Big Mac with fries? A New York Coney? Anything? Come on, a milkshake? They sound delicious. I want the Big Mac. Well, where I'm from, there's a 2 for $5 deal, so we can share. Share? No good. I don't share food. Although I wish everyone to be satisfied. What in the hell? Look, I need to ask you about the great beast. My children. Yes. They were made to feed mankind. They can never go hungry. The whale, the bunny, and the snake. Yeah? Well, your beasts have been causing trouble for the last 400 years. Do you know how much damage they've done? They were supposed to be eaten. Eaten? They're the ones doing the eating. Yes. And what do you expect? That the hunted would not become the hunters? The rabbit is to multiply over and over again. That way, there's never-ending food. Yeah, well now the rabbit's starting to treat everything like food. Even so, I am growing quite bored. What do you want? I want to know how to kill it. The rabbit. To kill the rabbit, it's drawn to great large amounts of mana. They all share one hive mind. To defeat it, you must kill them all at once. Not one can survive. It's just that simple, huh? No one's ever defeated my children. Yeah, well I already took down the white whale. So you have you? Look, I don't need you coming after me for revenge. But I am going to defeat the rabbit and the snake. You can try. Daphne would disappear, before eventually Echidna would return. She would apologize for the others that had shown up, Typhoon and Nirvana. She didn't expect for Pride and for Wrath to show up as well, thinking that they would jump her body at the last moment. Echidna would be thanked by Peter once more, as he told her that she had done more for him than he was expecting. Echidna would again ask if Peter wanted more information, but he would tell her that he had everything that he needed, and that from the bottom of his heart, he hoped that they could again speak someday. Echidna would smile widely, as she wanted that as well, as she had her own questions. Peter would ask what exactly she was after, and she would explain that she was the Witch of Greed. Knowledge was what she craved. She wanted to know everything about everything, and there wasn't anything that she didn't want to learn. In doing so, she would hope that Peter would meet once again. However, she would explain that to arrive for a third time would be very difficult. However, thanks to him supplying himself with enough of the witch factor, he should be capable the next time he needed to come here. If he didn't arrive via the trials, all he had to do was yell from the depths of his heart that he wants to know, and that if he did so in earnest, he might be able to return a third time. Before leaving, Peter would ask what exactly she would want as payment. Echidna would simply smile and say that the only thing she wanted was his mask. He would ask her if that would even be possible, and she would explain that it would only be in the mental realm, that in the real world he would still have his mask in tow. Not seeing any other way, Peter would give the mask over to her, as she thanked him and smiled. Peter would black out once again, his mind becoming a bit foggy and blurry, before eventually waking back up to the sanctuary. As he had now arrived, he would see that snow was now starting to fall and cover the ground once again. However, instead of it just being snow, there would be a pure dark shadow that loomed over everything. Garfield would arrive not too long after, telling him that they needed to move. The two of them would hop from the treetops until eventually getting farther away, as they could see the shadowy figure moving across the land. Peter recognizing the sensation, it couldn't be deniable. It was the Witch of Envy. Garfield, along with the army of Ryuzus, would attempt to take down the witch. However, it would be in vain as they would be defeated. Peter, in a desperate act, would confront it. The witch returning to Peter. The only thing that she would utter was her deep and undying love for him. Although Peter, he would object to those feelings, knowing full well that nothing she did could be considered love, that this was far from it. He remembered Rem. He remembered her and her smile. Everything he had sacrificed had been for her. The potential thought of losing her was more than what he could bear. As he was swallowed up in the darkness, he could feel himself in a state where he was unable to move, until he felt one sensation in his hand. Reaching down, he would see his mask starting to glow. He wasn't sure of what was happening at this moment. The mask starting to glow and morph into a dagger of light. As Peter slowly put the pieces together, he would realize that he had been tricked by Echidna, and that she must have seen this ahead of time, knowing what he needed to do. Peter cursed her for allowing himself to be used so easily, but even himself for being put in this situation. As the Witch of Envy would look down upon him, Peter would struggle through the darkness of the void that surrounded him. As he pulled the dagger of light to his chest, he would stab himself directly in the heart, coughing up blood as he looked up directly towards the sky fading into an everlasting darkness, until eventually everything would fade to black. In his dying moment, Peter would see the memories of the Witch of Envy, now starting to see and put things in a more clear light. And along her memories, he would see that of the Witch of Greed. He would take the stone that he had been given by Frederica before arriving to the resting place. Upon doing so, he would put the stone inside of the secret slot, opening the door to reveal that of a Ryuzu that was trapped inside of a crystal. The original Ryuzu Myers, along with the other clones of Ryuzu, would arrive to greet him, now being able to explain to him the truth of the sanctuary, that the original Ryuzu served as the barrier, and that it was only by completing the trials and shutting it down that would be the only way to free everyone. They would explain the overall story to Peter of what had happened to them long ago, that the Witch of Greed had originally made Ryuzu's clones out of Ode and Mana, a way to transfer her soul, so to speak. The more Peter learned, the more the situation started to be made clear of her true intent. She had been trying to figure out a way to extend her life, to keep on in her endless search for knowledge. When she was alive, she attempted to create host bodies to transfer herself to one after the other, using Ryuzu as the key. However, due to the flaw in the experiment, she were unable to be made into a proper vessel, and as such, for each clone that existed long after, they served as the watchful guardians over the sanctuary. Now realizing everything that had come to light, Ryuzu would also explain that Peter taking on the witch's factor, the Witch of Greed, he would now be able to command the Ryuzus, and they would aid him in any way that he needed, as he was qualified to take the trial. Peter would learn now that it wasn't just he that were capable, but it were Garfield as well. That he too had been capable of taking the trials, but for whatever reason, he failed and was one unable to do so. Peter knew that he had to figure out just what it was that was stopping Garfield. However, he knew now wasn't the time, as he had more things to worry about. He had 4 days. In 3 days, based on the calculations and everything that he had learned from Elsa in her last statement, in 3 days' time the mansion would be attacked. And in 4 days' time, the Great Rabbit would appear, along with the snow over the sanctuary. Now knowing what he needed to do, he would tell the Ryuzus to keep everything they had learned a secret. Before leaving, he would stop by to check on Amelia, making sure she was okay. He could see that she was dealing with the struggle of loneliness. Another factor that had gone in after a while was the fact that Puck was no longer speaking to her. No matter what she did, the small little cat familiar would no longer appear. Peter would assure her that everything was going to be fine, and she asked him to promise to be there for her. He would say that he would do so, although she would remark that she had a friend, a young man who she had grown rather fond of, and that she wished she could see him right now. The young man was always charming and unique in his own way, although he could be a bit clumsy and sometimes foolish, and he often had the ability of wearing his emotions on his sleeve. He was a young man who had also come from a strange land. He had claimed that it was from the Far East, although Lagunica was the eastmost kingdom in the world. In fact, it had not been too long before Peter had arrived in Lagunica in the first place that this young man had been sent away, as there was a mission that required his attention. Amelia couldn't quite put the familiar feeling to it, but for whatever reason, the two of them shared a lot in common, although it was hard to figure out what it was. Peter would learn more about this young man, learning that he too came from a world with strange money that he couldn't use, and that he was pretty much lost with nowhere to go, although thankfully he got some help from Reinhardt. The two of them met by chance, and through some odd means, he ended up coming to the mansion. He studied and applied himself hard, although he made plenty of mistakes along the way, and eventually he was able to become a pretty decent knight. Although a situation had occurred to a kingdom in the west that required his attention, so he had to leave in order to help aid in the conflict. Although before leaving, he gave her his word. He promised Miss Amelia that he would be back soon, giving her a kiss on the cheek for good luck before leaving. And then not too long after, the situation would happen, and then she met Peter, and that's how everything had come to be the way that it was. Peter was pretty enamored with this guy, and he hoped that he could meet him someday. As Peter left, he went to go write a note, a letter explaining everything. He knew that he needed to leave, but he also knew that Amelia needed some form of support, and he hoped that the letter would see her well. As he got aboard his ground dragon, he would give the letter to Ram, telling her to give it to Amelia as soon as possible, and that he would be back as quickly as he could. Ram nodding in understanding as Peter would drive off into the night. Before leaving, he would come face to face with Garfield once again. Garfield not wanting to let Peter leave, however this time Peter, instead of combating him with fists, would merely stare him down, telling him that now wasn't the time for these games. He would explain to Garfield that what he needed to do was important, and it was for everyone's sake. Garfield would only make him promise one thing, that whatever he was doing, that it wouldn't end up harming those in the sanctuary, and Peter would assure him of that. Once the two came to an understanding, he would quickly make his way to the mansion as fast as possible. Rem and Frederica would be taking care of the chores as Peter would arrive. Rem extremely happy to see that her Peter had returned. While Peter was happy to see the two of them, he would tell them that they needed to get out of there as soon as possible. He would tell them to take the ground dragon carriage and to get as far away as they could, and that he would join them as soon as possible at the rendezvous. The two understood the seriousness in Peter's voice and would nod in agreement as they would get aboard and leave, Peter needing to go and take care of Beatrice. He had remembered what he had been told by Ram before he had left, being told that if he told her to ask the question and say that he was that person, then everything would be made clear. As Peter arrived to the room, the great library, he would come face to face with Beatrice, this time not knocking on the door. "Well, it seems you've finally lost your manners, I suppose." "Beatrice, I'm sorry, but I understand. So, are you that person?" "I am, Beatrice. I am that person." "Then I can forgive you this one time. Who knew that my contract would finally be freed by you of all people? But if it was to be by anyone, then I am glad that it is you, I suppose." Peter went to get her so that they could get out of the mansion and leave as quickly as possible. However, as the two would make their way out of the front door, they would come face to face with none other than the bow hunter, Elsa, and a young girl who would be beside her. Peter recognized the girl as Amelia, the girl from the village. The girl who had disappeared just not too long after the mob beast attack. While he had heard the rumors and some of the suspicions, and many of the villagers not even being able to remember just who she truly was, or if she had been there at all, he didn't want to believe that it could be possible. But there was no mistaking it. She was working with the enemy. Elsa would gloat in revealing that it was a smart idea to try to send the two maids away. However, they didn't get very far. Elsa throwing Rem's mace covered in blood back at him, along with the hand of Frederica in her claw form. Peter would be absolutely disgusted as he would ask what happened to them. Off in the distance, he could see a fire as smoke was bellowing in the air. Around them, Amelia would begin to summon all of her mob beasts, everyone capable and deadly. Peter and Beatrice standing back to back. Peter had to keep his attention focused on fighting against Elsa, her speed and strength being rather deceptive. The two would engage in a battle once again, Peter learning her movements a lot better. Despite Elsa's speed and her much use of the daggers, Peter's spider sense gave him the slight edge in the fight, his sword matching her two twin blades, as Beatrice would take the fighting off against the mob beasts, swarming through and defeating them as she could. However, they would just continue to fight and swarm all around her. Peter was now distracted fighting a fight on two fronts. For as strong as Beatrice was, she was still getting overwhelmed, and Peter all the same. He would lean back for a moment to try to swipe away at one of the beasts that were attacking at Beatrice. Before he could get too close, he would throw his blade before destroying it, cutting it in half. As he went to punching and defeating many of the mob beasts as quickly as possible, the two girls would continue their relentless assault against them, Peter and Beatrice doing everything that they could to hold them off and slow them down. Although they would eventually be gotten the better of. Peter forcing and believing they had no choice, they would begin to run. Peter running away along with Beatrice, holding her as best he could. He would web swing throughout the forest as he made his way towards the fire, only to be met with the terrifying sight of the mutilated and destroyed corpses of Rem and Frederica. Peter would be distraught seeing their bodies. The deaths didn't get any easier no matter how many times he could be brought back. As he sat there, Rem's lifeless corpse looking back upon him, he would begin to grieve as he began to channel the wind spirits all around him, his eyes slowly starting to flicker in and out of the glow. The mob beasts that surrounded them started to be wiped away immediately, each one being killed one by one, Peter slashing them with the blades of wind. As he became so enthralled and focused on the mob beast, Beatrice tried to get him to calm down, trying to get him to stop. As he continued his fight against the mob beast, Elsa, along with her sister, would soon arrive as well, the two of them coming in for their combined attacks. Peter would overpower them with sheer force, sending them back as far as possible. Destroying much of the forest all around, he believed that he had taken them out with a great assault. He would look to Beatrice, and the two of them would solemnly cry, not sure of what they could do now. Peter wasn't sure of where to go from here. Could he just take his own life at this point? But if so, wouldn't he have to restart all over again? And he couldn't just leave Beatrice alone. As he went by to see what he could do, from out of the rubble, a blade would appear, jetting itself through Beatrice and coming out the other end. As Beatrice would fall, Peter would look to get towards her. However, in the exact moment that he did so, Elsa would appear from behind him. Peter using his sword, he would dodge the incoming attack, only for it to reverse, stabbing him in the shoulder blades once again, causing one of his arms to go completely limp. As another mob beast would come out of the forest, Peter would use propulsion to kick himself into the air. As Beatrice lay dying on the ground, he would yell in frustration. As he saw the great horde surrounding him, they would attack from all sides, biting and trying to tear away at Peter's body. Peter slashing and cutting and blasting them away. But even still, he was slowly being overwhelmed, until eventually he lay on the ground beside Beatrice. Reaching out his hand towards her, he tried desperately to pull her to safety. As he looked up to Elsa in defiance, Elsa would be disgusted at him as she would stab her blade into his eye. Peter would yell out in pain. However, before he had a chance to do anything, Beatrice, with the final bit of her power, would teleport him away. Soon awakening, he would find himself in the sanctuary once again. Once he arrived, he would see Amelia waiting. However, this Amelia was not the one that he had come to know. She had seemed completely jaded, her mind absolutely broken. She would look to Peter happily, saying that she was pleased that her friend had come back, and she was worried that she was going to be left all alone. But now she wasn't. She had her friend. And now she didn't need anyone. Not Rem, not Rom, not the villagers, not even that idiot Barasu. Peter would be absolutely horrified at what had happened to her. He tried to explain what had happened. He asked if she had gotten the letter, but she would just look at him puzzled, asking what letter he could be talking about. Not even sure of what to say at that moment, Peter would slowly walk away. As he made his way back outside, he would see that the ground was covered in snow once again. Looking at all the facts, looking at everything that happened up until this point, he knew there was only one other place to look. As he left, he would slowly trudge himself through the snow, before eventually he would run into Garfield. Garfield, angered, to ask what had happened, asking who had caused all this. Peter would simply explain that they had to see Roswaal and they would get their answers there. The two trudged along until eventually they arrived at the cabin, where Rom would be waiting, along with Roswaal in his bed. So, it seems you finally arrived, Peter. Cut the crap, Roswaal. What's going on here? You know what I'm talking about. Everything. It's you, isn't it? Roswaal would smile happily as he got out of his bed. Garfield would be angered to hear that it had been Roswaal this whole time. As he went to attack him, Rom would get in the way, protecting her master. The two of them standing face to face, prepared to fight once again. Peter would yell for him to stop, but before he could even finish his sentence, the both of them would be impaled by Roswaal's hand, the two of them falling to the ground. Rom being used as a sacrifice and a decoy to get to Garfield. Garfield now stabbed in the abdomen by Roswaal in his own hand. The two would fall to the ground. Garfield livid at the death of Rom. As he would slowly begin to transform, trying to heal himself or heal Rom, before he had a chance to do anything, Roswaal would kick his head off. You've seen them die, and yet it does not affect you. What's the matter, Peter? You seem angered, but not at all shocked. It's almost as if you've seen this before. Peter would only gather all of the mana into his fist before launching a wind cannon at Roswaal, blasting him out of the building. The two went into the forest area, Peter drawing his sword as Roswaal would get back to his feet. I see. You've definitely gotten a lot stronger, haven't you? The two would engage in a brief flurry in the fight. Despite Roswaal dealing with his injuries, Peter was worse for wear also. With only one eye, he was blinded in a blind spot to his left, unable to see as Roswaal would take advantage in his attacks. Peter standing firm as the two of them would engage with one another. Even for their injuries, it was without a doubt clearly obvious that Roswaal held the advantage. Why, Roswaal? Why? It's been you. This whole time. Back then, the mobbies, the cultists. Yes, it was me. You see, Peter, you could never understand, but I made a vow myself long ago. A promise that I intend to keep, and that I will see through till the very end. You're the reason behind the snow. But why? What do you have to? Isolation, Peter. I did what I did to isolate her, to make her all alone. It was by no coincidence that her precious Barasu was sent away. However, what I did not expect in my plans were you. I thought that if I could isolate her one by one, I could truly see her resolve to stand alone, but you just had to be my blessing in disguise. You were the one thing that I did not foresee at first, but even still, it's all been forewritten. It's what? Roswaal would reveal the tome that he had hidden away, showing that he had been the one in possession of the other half, the one true tome of wisdom. Seeing into the future, he knew everything that had been happening up until this point. Everything is going as according to my plans. I only need you to move down the path that works best for me. That is why you are going to keep on surviving. I will use you over and over again to get where I need to be. That is my resolve. Before the two could continue their fight, Peter would see that the great rabbit was now surrounding them. Roswaal, we need to call a truce. I don't know how, but we've got to try to get everyone out of... And why would I do that, Peter? What do you mean? Don't you... Where would we go? Until the trials are complete, no one can leave the sanctuary. Roswaal would walk forward now, accepting his death. Peter trying to get him to stop, but Roswaal would simply shoot a blast of mystical energy, blasting him far away. I truly believe one day you will catch up to me, Peter. What are you doing, Roswaal? You can't do this. If you end here now, your dreams, your ambitions, they all... I don't think you understand, Peter. You might have the ability to return, but I do not. But that is fine. As long as there is a version of me that is able to come out on top, then that is more than enough. That is why I will succeed in the long run. If you truly wish to catch up to me, Peter, then you are going to have to throw away all unnecessary things. Only then will you be able to get what truly matters to you. Only then will you be. Before Roswaal could finish his statements, the white rabbit would begin to attack, swarming around and destroying him. Peter would somehow get away from the ensuing fight, as he slowly made his way back to the sanctuary. As he made his way to the entrance, he would see Amelia smiling, her eyes cold and empty as they shined the deep violet. As he made his way towards her, the half-elf girl happily calling him over, saying that he looked tired and that he needed to rest. Peter, with no energy left to fight, would lay on her lap pillow. As he did so, She would hold him close, telling him not to be so reckless, and that he was all that she needed in this life. Nothing else in this world mattered to her. As Peter lay, he looked up to her one last time, looking deep into her eyes, as his vision would begin to fade, as he would bled out in the cold steps of the sanctuary. This concludes What If Spider-Man Was in ReZero, The Princess and the Spider, Season 2, Part 2. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that has to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for What If Deku Was a Power Ranger, Part 10. That's going to be coming out tomorrow. And What If Naruto Was the Avatar, Naruto Rebirth. Stay tuned for that as that drops on Friday. But anyway, that's going to be the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.